Well, is it time to ditch all teaching of religion in schools and instead teach kids ethics? Former High Court Justice Michael Kirby is asking the question, does religious education still have a place in secular schools? In a recent opinion piece, he argues the need for ethics is even greater today given the changes in our community's religious and ethnic makeup. Public schools, he says, should be places that reflect our society. Ethics classes in primary state schools, at least in New South Wales, are offered as the secular alternative to religious or scripture classes. But because the classes now aren't listed on enrolment forms, it's more difficult for parents to opt into them. Critics say that's been a deliberate move by that particular state government to placate religious groups. Well, let's start with you, Michael Kirby. What is the argument that you're making? Why is it so important to teach children ethics?
Well, as you'd expect with a person of my great fossil age, I'm not absolutely opposed to religious instruction. I used to go to the Church of England class, which was always the biggest and the best. We were all very proud of our size. And I there met an instructor at my high school, Fort Street, who became a lifelong friend. And teaching you about our Christian background for most people and about the stories around the Bible and the ethics that are taught there is generally actually quite good, and it's part of our culture, and so I'm not opposed to it, but you should be able to opt for the alternative. And when I go back to my old schools, primary schools or high schools now, they're overwhelmingly reflecting the variety of our population, and many of them are not Christian at all. So it should be easy to opt into secular ethics.
A lot of people that argue for teaching of religious studies over ethics say, well, you're actually teaching ethics through the study of faith. What do you see as being the difference between religious instruction and ethics?
I think the fundamental difference is that the religious instruction is starting from a book and from text and from rules, whereas in secular ethics they're going to talk through the issue and try to get what the young people and the teachers helping them think are the proper moral principles, the ethical principles that apply. And so one is a bit more rational, the other is believe. And there's a place for both of them, at least if you're brought up in a religious belief, as I was. It's something you should be able, and your parents should be able to opt into, I think. But in several states of Australia, for example, South Australia and Queensland, I don't think they've ever had this. This was a compromise in the 1870s, and it's a compromise we've continued to have in New South Wales. But now they've introduced this double difficulty of getting into the secular ethics classes, and that's not a good thing.
Kate McGregor, we all know it's a multi-faith, multi-race society that we live in now. Is teaching religion in state schools something that really should be consigned to a bygone era?
I want to make one thing really clear. Like Michael, I grew up with religious formation, and I actually am still a believer. That may surprise people because I've been a controversial figure amongst Christians, but I believe. I, however, think that the state school system should be free, universal and secular. I don't think there's any place for religious education in the state school system, nor do I think there should be chaplains in state schools. I think if you wish to embark on a religious education, do what my parents did and send your kid to a religious school.
I want to get some nuance.
Let me finish, please. I want to get some nuance into this. I just want to pick you up
on that point, though, because aren't we a society, our traditions, our laws are based on the sort of Judeo-Christian faith principle, therefore there's a value in all of us knowing that?
No argument about that, and I don't argue that religion has not been an enormously important cultural point, but the Public Instruction Act, as it was conceived in 1881 or thereabouts, was that schools were to be universal, free and secular, and I think that's appropriate. I think you render unto Caesar what is Caesar's and unto God what is God's, and I think to choose a specific religious curriculum, you choose a religious school. What I was trying to say is that I have a nuanced position on this, in that I do not believe in the driving of religion out of the public space, in the sense that the attempts to silence churches in their teaching even when that teaching demonises me for being transgendered or demonises Michael for being gay. I accept that as a society where religion has had a cornerstone and pivotal right, the churches must and may be allowed evangelise according to their faith traditions, whether that offends me or not. So I've got a nuanced position on this, but I think state schools are exactly that. They should be secular.
I've got a nuanced position too, Kate. I believe that you should have choice. And the compromise that was made back in the 19th century was they got a period, they got an hour effectively to show their wares. And the thing that worries me is that kids are growing up now without really a knowledge at all. They're not sent by their parents, as I was, to church, and they're not getting anything about the religious Judeo-Christian Islamic tradition at school. And therefore they just don't know anything about it, and that's a big loss in their lives, I think.
I agree, we're missing a large part of the Western canon through that, but we don't teach enough Shakespeare or Blake either.
I agree with that.
But the other point is this, that this commodification of ethics, as though you can sit down and teach ethics, I find mind-boggling as well.
Yes, but Kate, in New South Wales, if they don't go into the religious class, they're just put into minding. They just sit there and they're just reading books.
They're not allowed to be educated with anything else. That's under the rules.
Do teachers and parents not model ethics to children? Am I that much of a fossil that
well,
era
let's
is
ask
behind?
someone that's had a more recent experience of that, Jack.
Much more recent.
Did you have
Couple of years, Michael.
religious instruction at school? Was it a value? Did you get offered ethics?
No, I didn't have it at my school.
Didn't have religion?
Didn't have religion. The ethical teaching wasn't part of my schooling experience either.
God, you're godless and you got no ethics.
Yeah, got no hope either. But I think one of the things that I've found probably from our design of the work that we've been trying to do with kids is there is a bit of a gap in terms of that ethical framework teaching, and especially with the move towards standardised testing throughout the whole process from 3, 5, 7. You're just basically training kids to work in that mechanical mindset, and the challenge with that is in the world that we're living in now, we're seeing more and more jobs go away to technology. We're seeing a world where you need to be able to think and navigate things in different ways and to make complex decisions quite regularly.
So you need those sort of
I
frameworks.
think the frameworks are critical.
Okay.
I think they're absolute game changers for this generation, because we're facing so many ethical and moral dilemmas, I think, very regularly.
So a question about that then, Hugh, because you've been involved in teaching ethics at one of your children's schools. Is that what you give them? Do you give them that kind of
Yeah,
framework?
look, it's a really interesting question. Kate says, can you teach ethics at school? And the point about it is, it was a discovery journey for me. I turned up, the kids went to school, they said, which scripture? Absolutely, thanks, mate. They said, which scripture are your kids going in? I went, scripture? Hang on a minute, what's going on here?
Yeah.
And then I found out that there was this ethics alternative, and I thought, well, if it's going to exist, then I should volunteer. I had some time to volunteer. Sadly, I don't this year anymore have that time, so I've had to give it up, which is a big shame because I really enjoyed the contact with the kids. But the thing about it is that I taught what we call stage 1, so you're talking about year 1 and year 2 kids. And I did that because that was where my son was in the school system. And so I taught these classes of my child's peers and so on. The thing which is interesting about it is that it's not a case where you say throw a dilemma out there, let the kids knock it around and then tell them how they should think. It is absolutely not about that. What it's about is essentially a sort of a trick. It's a noble trick. The whole exercise is to get kids to listen to ideas. So you develop a story. It may be about some issue like justice or selfishness, or is it ever okay to lie, or is it ever okay to be lazy or something?
And they've been taught this by a journalist.
Your cynicism, sir. But here's the point. The kids can have whatever point of view that they want. You encourage them to think about it and to come up with ideas. The key thing is that you're really teaching them what the ethics mob call to develop a community of inquiry, and this is what they take forward into life, because this is where you listen respectfully to someone else's point of view. You can disagree with them. You should disagree with them respectfully. Someone else's idea might help you develop your own ideas, so then you throw in something else which adds to what other people have seen. And you see kids do this.
If you don't have any rules
No,
at
no,
all.
there are rules. There are rules.
Yes,
There are
okay.
rules essentially about behaviour and how you you respond to each other. Kids are amazing. You give them a question about justice or selfishness or lying, and they understand those concepts at the age of 6 years old remarkably well. And then they can discuss that between themselves, and you can see them showing respect for each other. And the idea is that when they go out from the classroom and ideas come up, is it okay to knock off school early and go to the park? Whatever, they can have a conversation about it and come to their own ethical view of what they're doing. You're training them to think about ethical issues rather than actually giving them rules about ethics.
So sort of case study simulations with stories where there's a consultation. And I know you've offered us a case study, if you like, a moral dilemma you faced yourself, or an ethical dilemma that you faced in your career. Can you tell us what it was?
Well, every day was an ethical dilemma in a sense, because if you're sitting on the High Court or other courts, you're deciding a clash of values quite often, and you have to sort of work out what the law says of it, what the Constitution says, or an Act of Parliament, or the judges have said. But this was something where I always took a hard line. If anybody had an interest of any kind in a case, if any judge had any interest, I always insisted they should not sit, not participate. But there was a discussion amongst the High Court judges, amongst themselves, as to whether they should put up to the government, the Howard government, that it should provide, in the case of same-sex partners, for their travelling allowance and other benefits that the other spouses and partners got, including the opposite sex partners. And the judges divided, as often they did. 3 said, no, we don't want to go there, that's controversial, it's political, we won't do that. And 3 said, no, this is a basic matter of justice and fairness, we do want to go there and we want to take a stand, and your partner should get his benefits. And so I was in the dilemma, do I take a part in this? And I thought at first, no, I mustn't take part because I have an interest in the outcome.
Which is?
That my partner was going to get some moolah and for driving faithfully. We were the most family values of any of the justices. He was always down there, always cooking the dinner, walking with me.
Do tell us about the family values of the others. I'd be interested to know.
Yeah, well, we were a true couple who were, anyway, Mary Gaudron, who was a very feisty justice who'd put up this proposal, said, I'm not doing this, Kirby, for you. I'm doing this for the principal and for the other people in other courts that have the right to know what we've done in the High Court of Australia and what is the thing we've stood up for, and we're standing up for equality. So you've got to do it. And I thought, oh, well, it's a clash between my personal interest and my view about not taking part if you've got a personal interest, and the fact that it may affect lots of others, and it's a matter of sort of basic principle of equality.
But you did do it.
So I did do it, yes, I did do it. I always did what Mary told me.
In the spirit of inquiry, what's the thoughts of the panel? Jack, did he do the right thing?
I'd say absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think you fight for fairness and equality, and you want every human being, especially in a place like Australia, to have equal opportunities. So.
Even though he'd been the strongest of the lot of them on recusing yourself in matters of personal interest.
Yeah, but I think when it comes down to the way people live and their behaviours around whether it's sexuality, gender, race, their rules go out the window and you fight for what's right, which is for people to have the opportunities and equal opportunities.
Is that right, Kate? Rules go out the window?
Kirby J has never erred, in my knowledge, including in the work choices case. I thought his and Callinan's were the most brilliantly argued states' rights cases I've ever read.
We were brilliant in those days, Kate.
So what does the school ethics consultant think of this?
Well,
Did you do the right thing?
Because
Can we get a critique, please?
Yes, yeah, because I think that there's a danger there, not that your judgment would be poor, or that as a point of fairness that you weren't making a case, but rather for the perception of having a conflict of interest. That would be one which I'm certainly not...
An interest. It wasn't really a conflict. It was that I had an interest, and it was a financial interest, which the law is generally very, very... But
it would also be the perception. It could be potentially a contentious issue. I don't know in the public space how contentious that ever got, but it was potentially contentious.
Well, this
and
was
so then the
private.
question.
This was a private meeting, and it
Yeah.
wouldn't have been known. But in fact, it was a big battle at the time, and looking back on it, it was pretty awful. But it has been partly resolved, and only a few steps remain in Australia, and I hope they won't take too long.
You know we are on television, right now, so everyone knows.
Oh, everyone knows. Well, I was being very quiet and very butch, and Kate went on and said I was gay. So the rabbit is out of the bag.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to out you.
No, it's a bit late, Kate.